interests. I don't know.
That I agree with. I've never seen the point of being a super fan. I mean, I've got people I'd love to see, but not 2 or 3 times, let alone 29 times. But do you feel like we've been pushed around by these fans who are unfairly making money off the band and its popularity, while at the same time having nothing to do with the tour officially?
Yeah, I mean, I was being serious when I was hoping for the gumboot-clad revolution. I hope we do storm the barricades and we do evict them and we do show them how New Zealand does things. But can I also just question, who on earth listens to U2? Like, when U2 was on my iPhone... We know when you have your iPhones and they were, like, automatically downloaded with U2?
Did you say baby boom?
I said...
Ironic, baby boomers.
No, overrated band.
Yeah, and I feel like they just
overrated.
They just have like 2 songs that kind of all sound the same, and then everything else is just a
got 2
copy
songs.
of that.
Yeah. One's about a Joshua tree. The other's what's the other one?
The
Wall?
a tongue
Something
baby,
about a wall?
the fly, or whatever. What's that?
It's 4 away from 5. Quite a bit of response around ice creams. I agree with Wallace. Ice cream.
I'll just be back under my rock.
Yeah, you go to the rock, Ben. Seriously, get down.
It's just in the corner. Ice cream promotion is totally against everything you usually discuss on the panel. Stop laughing, please, at Wallace's opinion. Yes, do run, walk, swim. The high lasts longer.
I went to the gym today and I had an ice cream sandwich, and you know what? Both made me equally happy.
But look, this person's got a very good point. Thank you for texting me. Again, I agree with Wallace, but I'd go further. Things don't make us happy. Doing things does. Happiness as a commodity is bread and butter to the ad industry, but it is never truly theirs to sell, Mike says. Colin says, ice cream is frozen. There was a theory that the body energy required to warm it up equal to the calories consumed, so it's not fattening after all. So thank you very much for that response there. Now, finally on the show, comedian Stephen Colbert's trip to New Zealand cost us more than $100,000, Tourism New Zealand has revealed. The American visited the country last month after Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern invited him on his late-night TV show. He'd planned to come in March, but had to put it off after the Christchurch mosque shootings. Tourism New Zealand said that while the broadcaster of his show, CBS, funded the trip, most of it, we foot the bill for accommodation, etc. But as Colbert is the number one show on late night, it's expected to generate $5 million worth of advertising for the country when it airs. The question is, round the panel, is it money well spent? Is it worth it? Ben, you first.
Oh, it's tremendous value for money. In terms of Tourism New Zealand and its annual budget, they would easily drop $100,000 on some consultants to just come up with this idea and then never successfully execute it. The fact that it, because of the Prime Minister's popularity and profile overseas, that they just sort of made this happen. Yeah, like huge bargain.
It's kind of like futures money though, isn't it? We don't know that it's going to generate $5 million worth of interest or more. We don't know that.
It's fairly easy to calculate, though, isn't it? Because you can look at all the graphs that are around exposure on TV versus the sales for a product that they talk about. You can probably make the same sense that, like, if you talk about New Zealand on TV, they're going to have a surge of... Americans are already coming here anyway because they're trying to escape Trump and worrying about, like, when the nuclear crisis hits, when Trump nukes us, they're all going to come to New Zealand anyway. So let's get them all over here now and we can indoctrinate them slowly.
Yeah. It's been great having you both on. Running does not make you happy, Wallace, and it's not natural to stop. No animal does it. But ice cream doesn't make you happy either, but it sure tastes good. Ben Thomas, Verity Johnson, it's been a pleasure to have you on this crazy show this afternoon. Have a great weekend. Eleventura, thank you for producing the show. Checkpoint next. I'm Wallace Chapman, back 3:45 sharp Monday. See you then.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere nei, turn out the lights and close the door. Oranga Tamariki should be shut down, according to a prominent Māori leader who's warning whānau to record any attempts to take away their babies. Forensic experts reveal details of blood-stained carpet and signs of a clean-up in the apartment where Grace Millane died. We go inside one of the motels that's made millions off the back of homelessness. A man details his abuse at the hands of a predatory priest and rejects the Catholic Church's apology. We're with a woman who, after 2 years rough sleeping, gets a brand new apartment. And Fitbits for cows. GPS trackers are mapping cattle movements in Canterbury.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora ko Susana Leata tēnei. Firefighters surveyed by their union say they weren't given proper breaks and had inadequate training to cope with the Sky City Convention Centre fire in Auckland last month. Some say they were so exhausted fighting the fire that they fell asleep on high ladders. They say they also had to urinate in the street and buy their own food. The union's Auckland Secretary Martin Campbell says the findings of the survey have been presented to fire and emergency.
81% of our firefighters were reporting issues with fatigue management, lack of rotation, no ability to have breaks or rests, working extremely long hours, 18, 19, 20 hours plus.
Martin Campbell of the Professional Firefighters Union. An independent review of the Southern District Health Board's maternity care has found it to have been stymied by confusion, unclear accountability and poor planning. The report was commissioned after complaints about the board's changes to maternity care, such as introducing child and maternal hubs where babies could only be delivered in an emergency. The Ernst & Young report says key stakeholders, including the DHB, have misaligned expectations about how services should be delivered, and delivery of the maternity strategy needed greater monitoring. The head of the DHB, Chris Fleming, says there was inadequate planning for changes and the organisation will learn from the challenges it faced. The jury in the trial of the man accused of murdering Grace Millane has been told blood found in his apartment is almost definitely hers. The 27-year-old man is on trial in the High Court in Auckland, charged with murdering the British backpacker in his apartment last December. The jury has heard that some likely bloodstains, as well as flecks of blood, were identified with luminol testing. This afternoon, ESR scientist Turlo Thomas Stone said blood spots on a fridge almost definitely came from Ms Millane.
The likelihood of obtaining these DNA results is at least 500,000 million, or 5 times 10 to the 11 times more likely if the DNA in the sample originated from Miss Millane rather than from another individual selected at random from the New Zealand population.
The court has now adjourned for the week and will resume on Monday morning when the Crown will call more of its 36 witnesses. A tenant says she's overjoyed to be moving into a brand new Auckland social housing complex. The Salvation Army today officially opened Te Hononga Tangata, also known as the Royal Oak Housing Community in Mount Albert Road. 59 tenants will be moving in by the start of next month. One of them, Ray Connor, who is currently living in emergency housing, says it's been extremely hard to find a place to rent.
It was really disheartening because it just seemed impossible, especially with the amount of money we get and stuff like that, and the prices up here in Auckland are really high, so this is way more affordable.
Ray Connor. The Salvation Army says that while it's excited about giving 59 people homes, it has had 700 referrals for places in Te Hononga Tangata. New Zealand's High Commissioner to Samoa says the claim that New Zealand is to blame for Samoa's measles epidemic is unfair. Trevor Matheson says New Zealand has helped Samoa since the outbreak began. He says equipment and medicine has been flown in, while an offer of medical support remains. Dr Matheson acknowledges, however, that links between measles epidemics in Samoa and Auckland need to be reassessed. He says that when Samoa's outbreak is under control, there will be an opportunity to look at where improvements can be made. The knighting of the criminal justice reform advocate Kim Workman has been celebrated in Greytown today. Sir Kim is the first person from Ngāti Kahungunu ki Wairarapa to receive a knighthood. More than 200 people gathered at Papawai Marae to celebrate the honour. Sir Kim says it is an honour for his work to be recognised by his people.
When I got the knighthood, I thought, I'd love to be able to have a celebration here, just to honour those people who helped to raise me when I was a boy, who sort of breathed knowledge into me and some wisdom, not all of it I don't think that I needed, but it was lovely.
Sir Kim Workman grew up in Greytown and served as a police constable in Masterton as a young man before going on to become head of the country's prison service, National Director of Prison Fellowship New Zealand and Families Commissioner. The Canterbury town of Rolleston has had the highest uptake of ultra-fast broadband in the country. The Digital Media Minister, Chris Foy, says an unprecedented 74% of its households and businesses have moved to ultra-fast services. He says that shows the network is providing benefits outside bigger centres. The Selwyn District Mayor Sam Broughton says Rolleston is a fast-growing area with a very young and digitally savvy population.
Rolleston was a town of about 2,000 people 20 years ago, and now it's about 20,000 people. So there's been a lot of infrastructure put on the ground. That includes the roads and water and sewage, but it also includes the work done for the ultra-fast broadband network.
According to the latest quarterly connectivity report, by the end of September, 10 cities and towns had a UFB uptake of more than 60%. It's 5:05. The Toronto Wolfpack are rejecting suggestions their signing of Sonny Bill Williams could be costly, given he's 34 and has had a couple of injury-plagued seasons. Williams has signed a 2-year deal reportedly worth $10 million with the Canadian Rugby League club, which will play in the English Super League next season. Director Brian Noble says injury is a risk with any signing.
You can't make decisions on the back of thinking that somebody might get injured. You make decisions on the back of his great profile. He's a great fella. The humility he has with different people and what he brings off the field as well as on the field is clearly a criteria we've looked at.
Brian Noble. Black Caps pace bowler Trent Boult joins the New Zealand T20 side in Napier tonight as they chase a series win in the fourth of their 5 games against England. New Zealand are currently 2-1 up. Boult hasn't played a T20 international since February last year and he's raring to go.
There's a series on the line here at the moment, and obviously I'm eager to come in and put my best step forward, and obviously hope to seal this series off nicely. So it's a format that I haven't been involved in much at the international level over a period, but no, I'm looking forward to coming in and trying to do my thing.
Trent Boult. The match starts at 6. Australian cyclist Nick White has won Stage 5 of the Tour of Southland. Defending champion Michael Vink is within grasp of a second Tour title with a lead of just over 2 minutes. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, comedian Michelle Accourt selects the mixtape. There's plenty of fresh air on Country Life. In fact, it's been windy all week. Dave Dobbin is the Friday Night Live act. And because we understand this week's element, boron, plays a key role in strengthening our skeletal integrity, we've got a sonic tonic dedicated to bones. On Nights, The Real McCoy with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Waitomo, also Coromandel, Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Taumaranui. Cloudy periods and isolated showers. Patchy drizzle morning and night. Showers more widespread about Northland, Bay of Plenty and Taupo tomorrow evening. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, fine weather. Whanganui, Manawatu and Wairatapa, cloudy periods and isolated showers. Taranaki, Horowhenua, Kapiti Coast and Wellington, mostly cloudy. Scattered showers becoming isolated later tomorrow. For Marlborough, cloudy periods and a few showers, but the Kaikoura coast remains dry. Nelson, Bulla and Westland, occasional rain, heavier tomorrow. Isolated thunderstorms for Bulla and Westland. Fiordland, expect rain with heavy falls and isolated thunderstorms easing by tomorrow night. Canterbury and Otago, cloudy periods, scattered showers and norwesterly gales for the high country. Southland, cloudy periods and occasional rain. Chatham Islands, cloudy periods tomorrow. RNZ National, it's 5:08.
Thanks, Susanna, and thanks for joining us this Friday. You're with Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. Probable blood stains on the carpet and evidence of a clean-up. Those are some of the details the jury in the trial of the man accused of murdering Grace Millane heard today. Forensic experts have been in the witness box telling the court about what was found in the apartment where the British tourist died. The 27-year-old man, who has name suppression, denies the charge and is on trial in the High Court in Auckland. Our reporter Sarah Robson is covering the case and filed this report.
ESR scientist Diane Krenfeld told the jury that when forensic teams walked into the apartment in the City Life Hotel, there was no blood to be seen. But when the floor was tested with luminol, large patches of it glowed. Ms Krenfeld said they found 2 roughly circular areas of probable blood staining between the bed and the wardrobe. The larger area was about 70 centimetres in diameter and had some circular smearing in it. The smaller area was about 30 centimetres in diameter.
This had a more defined circular shape, and in my opinion, it could have come from the base of a circular object, such as a bucket.
Diane Krenfeld said they found other evidence of blood staining.
Around the main circular stain were small spots, such as would occur from a liquid containing blood dripping on the floor.
Diane Krenfeld said there was no blood visible on the surface of the carpet, but she described what they found when it was lifted by the police.
So there was red staining that was blood visible on the underside of the carpet, on both sides of the underlay, and also on the concrete floor in the area of the large and smaller circular probable blood staining.
There was also blood on footprints around the room. Diane Krenfeld said the evidence pointed to a clean-up having occurred.
The shape of the probable blood staining and the presence of blood and other residues in the underlay and the floor provide strong support for the proposition that clean-up of blood had occurred in this area.
But Diane Krenfeld couldn't say how long the blood had been there or when the cleaning happened. Another ESR forensic scientist, Turlo Thomas Stone, confirmed that DNA in the blood found in the room was Ms. Millane's. He said blood samples were taken from the carpet underlay, the door of the fridge, and the inner lining of a suitcase found in the wardrobe. Under questioning by defence lawyer Ian Brookie, Mr Thomas Stone confirmed they didn't find any male DNA under Ms Millane's fingernails when they examined her body.
There's potentially no male DNA there in the beginning, or any male DNA that may have been there has been lost.
Turlo Thomas Stone also confirmed they did not find any male DNA in swabs taken from her skin. This afternoon, forensic toxicologist Diana Kapitos told the jury Ms Millane's blood alcohol level was more than 2 times the legal driving limit. Yesterday, the jury watched CCTV footage which showed Ms Millane and the accused man bar hopping, drinking tequila, cocktails and jugs of margarita for 3 hours. But Ms Kapitos said decomposition could have lowered alcohol levels in Ms Millane's body.
I cannot be certain that the concentration of alcohol I found in Ms Millane's blood sample was the same as was present in her blood at the time of her death.
Diana Kapitos said there was no evidence of drugs in Ms Millane's system. The trial has adjourned for the week and will resume on Monday morning. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko Sarah Robson, aho.
Shut up shop now, that's the message to Oranga Tamariki from a prominent Māori leader. The chair of the Whānau Ora Commissioning Agency, Merepeka Raukawa-Tait, says Oranga Tamariki has a toxic culture and has been riding roughshod over families, snatching babies without any consideration for the devastating intergenerational impacts. Her comments follow a damning report into an attempt to remove a 6-day-old baby from his 19-year-old mother in Hawke's Bay. The internal review that identified a litany of errors prompted a public apology from the boss of Oranga Tamariki and immediate policy changes. Merepeka Raukawa-Tait says nothing good will ever come from Oranga Tamariki and that the Crown should have nothing to do with the care of children.
I would prefer that we didn't have a State Department anywhere near, particularly Tamariki Māori. Māori have to accept that we will own our own issues, we will provide the solutions, we will look to the people who are in the communities right now, and I'm talking very much about the Māori service providers, Whānau Ora navigators and others who are in the community. They know the families, they're already easily identifiable, but we want early intervention and prevention. We want to strengthen and make those families strong. We know it can be done, but it's not going to be done by a government department pumping, as of this year, from the budget, another $1 billion to make them smarter at uplifting the children. No way, that should not be happening any longer.
So what do we do? Just close down Oranga Tamariki?
Well, that would be a damn good start, I have to say. Why do we need a big organisation to try and take? The state has never done a good job at caring for the children. So put that $1 billion that was allocated to them this year in the budget, put that into the families, into the organisations who don't have the money to do the breadth of the work that they should be doing, and they're doing very well with what they've got, but it's not adequate. Strengthen them, make sure that they can identify the homes that are safe, and in every whānau there is someone who will step up, but most of them don't have the financial resources to take on another 2 or 3 little ones into their home. So rather strengthen the families than to strengthen a government department. That sort of thing should never happen.
So do you seriously think it's possible to shut up Oranga Tamariki and keep our children safe? Get rid of it altogether? I mean, when? Now?
Yes.
Right now?
I don't see why not. Well, first of all, there are another couple of reports to come out, reviews to come out. The one by the Commissioner for Children, the Human Rights Commission, and also the Ombudsman, Mr. Bouchier. So, and of course, we've got our own one, which is our Māori review as well, the whānau order review. So we've got a number of reviews. All of them will be damning of the Oranga Tamariki. I'm absolutely convinced of that. Certainly they will have some recommendations, but I would like to say shut it down. Shut it down, get rid of it, have a core policy advisory ministry advising the minister, but everything else, the delivery of the services, the supporting of the families, the supporting of the mothers, all of the supports that need to get in, they should not be delivered by a government agency. No way.
So you are conducting your own inquiry, and without preempting the outcome of that, you've given a clear indication there that you think the outcome's going to be negative. You've interviewed, over 1,000 whānau. What are the common themes coming through here? Are the cases like the ones that we have seen in this report, or are they worse?
They are worse in some instances, but what we have seen is really a total disregard for the fact that Māori can look after themselves if given the support to do so. We've got intergenerational uplifting of children, so there's families in 1, 2, 3 generations that have been uplifted. Now, you can't tell me that somewhere along the line resources couldn't have been applied to that family through accredited Māori provider, service provider, to be able to support that whānau to make the changes necessary. Otherwise, we're continually going to uplift Māori children and send them off to juvenile hall and into prison. We don't want to see that. The government says it's committed to making changes for Māori. If you are, then let Māori make the changes themselves. As hard as it might be for Māori to confront some brutal facts, and Lisa, there are some brutal facts that we have to confront, but the government won't confront those. Their only solution is get those kids out of there, separate the mothers from the children, and we know the lasting trauma that has, and the children never come back as adults back to the whānau, so that they know their place. And so these are hard conversations that must be had by iwi amongst themselves, but it needs to be had.
When you talk about hard conversations and brutal facts, what exactly are you talking about? Because you know there are going to be people out there listening to you, Merepeka, who say, if Māori can look after their kids, why aren't they looking after them? Why are they overrepresented in statistics relating to abuse and poor treatment? You know that's what people will be asking.
Yes, I do know, but I have to say I have very little regard for those comments. First of all, what have those people ever done to assist Māori to be able to take their place in this country as full contributing citizens? What we have to understand is in New Zealand we've had piss poor policy over many years that has relegated Māori to the sideline. We have seen structural reform come to this country in the 1980s that absolutely had a devastating effect on many Māori families. And so, what we have to look at is what has happened. There's been a chronology of events in recent times, not going way back into historical times, into recent times, that have not supported and helped Māori families to get to the stage where they can contribute. And so we've seen all of this systemic racism and discrimination in our education system. I'm on a health board. I've been there for 9 years. I've just been re-elected for a 4th term. I can tell you, if you want to see discrimination, look to our health boards up and down this country. So all I'm just saying is that we have to support those families to know that there is another way that they can get through life, and it is with the support of the wider community, with knowing who they are, be proud of who they are, and knowing that they have a right to contribute in New Zealand society, that this is their country and they have a right to be able to take their place and be fully contributing members. It's going to be hard because of where they've been parked up for such a long time, and that's no longer acceptable.
Are you angry, Merepeka?
I'm very, very angry, Lisa. I've been in this space for such a long time. I've seen what has happened for Māori women's access to justice when they come through the court system, when they try to report domestic violence, family harm, rape, all of these things. I've seen them brushed to the side, our children brushed to the side. And we continue to talk about, oh, Māori, why don't you pull yourselves up by your bootstraps? It's no longer acceptable. We have to see what have they had to cope with over all of these years, and still the government department is saying, we know what's best for you. They do not. Least government is best for Māori. We don't go to them for anything really if we can help it. No one's going to pick up the phone and say, or pick up the mobile and ring Oranga Tamariki and say, listen, there's a child in danger, we need your support. Nobody does that. That is one of the most, I think it's the most distrusted government department in this country because of what it does to children, what it does to families. And if there is no trust there, there is no relationship there, and nothing good will come of it.
Can it be redeemed? Can that trust be built?
I don't think so. I do know that recently there have been some accords, memorandum of understandings with a number of iwis in the country. I think the iwi think that that's the best that they can do. I think we can do a lot better by getting this organisation out of our hair and saying to Māori families, you identify, if there's an issue in your family, you identify one person that we know you respect, you trust, and you would have no hesitation in putting your children in the care of that person. Let's strengthen that person. Let's look to see what other needs there are in the family. I mean, sometimes it's housing, it's no income, somebody's inside, there's truancy, there's ill health, mental health. All of those things impact on a family's ability to cope. Unfortunately, sometimes the weak and the vulnerable in the families wear it. That's not acceptable. We want our children, and indeed everyone in the homes, to be safe and to be well. But we have to strengthen the families. I don't want to see any more money going in to make a government agency smarter at uplifting children, Māori or others.
So those iwi that are signing memorandums with Oranga Tamariki, are they being... Hoodwinked? I wouldn't say they're being, well, that was my expression, hoodwinked. I don't think so. I think they've entered into that in good faith and goodwill. But the only thing really is if there is going to be an uplift, they will be notified. Why don't they say no? We want to be right where, if there is any concern raised about one of our children in our rohe, we want to know. We want to act quickly. But the thing about it is, we should be there prior to the event. Most of the Māori uplifts in recent years, certainly a great percentage, have been of newborns. Well, you don't just have a baby overnight. You've got 9 months to identify somebody in that whānau or extended whānau or the hapu of the iwi. You've got midwives who can inform you. You've got everybody who could, the immediate and extended family, who could be developing a very, very robust plan for moving forward from the time the baby is born to see it's going to be safe. But more importantly, helping the young mother and the father to say, hey, listen, there's some concerns that we have. We need to make sure this baby's coming into a safe home. So get your A into G, and we're going to help you to make sure the changes in the home have been made. And it's not that difficult. Merepeka, that newsroom video expose, it showed that a number of the Oranga Tamariki staff involved there, the frontline staff, they were Māori. Yet this agency failed to maintain the mana of the family, consult with the whānau and look at wider placements. Can you be Māori and operate within Oranga Tamariki and be true to kaupapa Māori? Does Oranga Tamariki allow that to happen?
That's a very good question, Lisa, and I don't think you can. And certainly not in the organisation that it was, and I believe there has been an attempt to change that, and I know there has. But when you've belonged, and those, the social workers that I saw there were of a certain age. They weren't young. They weren't newcomers to this area of work. So what has happened, I believe, is they've become institutionalised as well, in terms of they know the system, they can throw the book at you, they can read the regulations backwards and frontwards, but it doesn't help, and it's certainly not a kaupapa Māori way. I mean, if you were to come to Te Arawa or anywhere else and say, this is how we're going to uplift a baby in your rohe, which has happened, I might add, then we don't want to see that happen. It's happened in the past, and it shouldn't be happening now. And this is what the Minister and the CEO didn't want to see, and yet 2 years down the track, that is still going on. That sort of behaviour has been institutionalised within those senior social workers, and for them to make a call like that and to be so disrespectful and distrustful of the family, the kaumātua and the midwives, I just think that was disgraceful behaviour. So, shame on them.
So what are you telling your Māori families in the way they should deal with Oranga Tamariki?
Well, first of all, I say they should never be speaking to Oranga Tamariki without any support. That's absolutely crucial. I mean, we wouldn't even know about this case had it not been for that brave family. And, you know, they've had to put themselves on the line in terms of people know now who they are, whether or not we pixate their faces or things like that. Everybody doesn't, certainly most people do know who they are. They were brave enough to say, bring your cameras in. This has happened once before. We don't want it to happen again. We would never have known that this was going on. And now, of course, it's opened up a can of worms, because what we know through the Māori families who before have never been asked to say what was the impact, how were you treated, and that's of course the focus of our inquiry, that we know that this is just merely the tip of the iceberg. So what we're saying to our Māori families is now record everything, take someone with you, and do not take this lying down. Get in touch with your whānau order navigators, get in touch with somebody else that you know that can support you as well. In every DHB there is a Māori liaison person. Make sure that person is there. Make sure you bring your kaumātua on, you know, and take older people with you, although I have to say in the past they've been dismissed and pushed to the side as well. But, you know, I think we have to push back on this department absolutely in every way possible.
Whānau Ora Commissioning Chair Merepeka Raukawa-Tait. It is 25 minutes past 5. Let us know what you think of that. I'm interested to know if you agree with Merepeka Raukawa-Tait. Is it time to get rid of Oranga Tamariki and redirect that money through Māori-led agencies and let them take a Māori approach to dealing with the problem? You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Sonny Bill Williams is now reportedly the highest paid player in either code of rugby in the world after confirmation of his move to the Toronto Wolfpack Super League club. Williams' future was up in the air following the conclusion of the Rugby World Cup, but here's confirmed rumours he'll be returning to the code that made him famous. Bridget Tunnicliffe reports.
Wonga to Sonny Bill Williams, holding it up beautifully for 20!
One of Williams' strengths throughout his career has been his signature offload. And now the Toronto Wolfpack are set to offload a record amount of cash for the dual code superstar, with his 2-year deal worth a reported $10 million. That's a lot of money for the 34-year-old who's had an injury-prone past couple of years. But the Wolfpack are confident he's still a world-class athlete and won't be an expensive mistake. Toronto Wolfpack Vice President John Pallett says signing Williams is not just about his on-field performances.
When you're taking into account this signing, you are with one eye on the commercial side and what it can do to help us grow our brand. But obviously you're not going to sign a player if you've got any concerns on injury or fitness or form. So I think all of those boxes have to be ticked, and obviously we think we've got still a world-class athlete coming in.
And it's that connection between Williams and the fans that could be key for both him and the club. He made sure he introduced himself on social media as soon as the deal was finalised.
Hey guys, Sonny here. Just a quick message to the Toronto fans and team. I'm looking forward to getting over there. Just want to say that I'm not coming over for a holiday. I'm coming over to do some work, and God willing we can have a successful season on and off the field.
After playing with the Bulldogs and Roosters in the NRL, Williams turned to rugby in 2008 with the French club Toulon. He then played for Canterbury in the Provincial Rugby Championship in 2010 before making his Super Rugby debut with the Crusaders. He won titles with the Chiefs in 2012 and 13. He made his All Blacks debut in 2010 and was part of 2 World Cup winning teams, and played the last of his 56 tests against Wales in the playoff for third at the World Cup last week. Williams paid tribute to some of those who have helped him in his rugby career.
Influential figures in my career, obviously Tana Umanga, Johnny Wilkinson, John Kerwin, Dave Rennie, Philip St. Andre. You guys, put their belief in me when it was still the unknown whether I could go all the way or not. So I'm forever thankful.
Long-time rugby league commentator Alan McLaughlin says the only issue he sees for Williams will be how his ageing body holds up. As for returning to league, McLaughlin doesn't think it will pose any problems for him.
It's not difficult for Sonny Bill Williams because he's the architect of this system of switching codes. He's done it so many times, it's almost second nature to him. You know, he started off as a rugby league player and played successfully in Australia for the Kiwis, then switched to rugby. He's done boxing and he's gone to World Cup, so I don't think it's any pressure on him whatsoever.
Alan McLaughlin. On the international front, both the Kiwis and Samoa have shown interest in SBW. He made 12 appearances for the Kiwis, while he's eligible for Samoa through his father's heritage. The Kiwis captain Benji Marshall welcomes his switch back to league. Marshall says Williams has made an impact on and off the field in both codes.
Oh, I think he's been a great role model for both codes, especially for young kids growing up in New Zealand who probably don't feel like they have the opportunities that everyone else gets. But I think what he's shown is that with hard work and determination, you can do whatever you want, and you got to give him full credit for what he's not only what he's done on the field, but what he's done off the field for people of New Zealand as well.
Benji Marshall. The Toronto Wolfpack kick off their 2020 season on February 2nd. For Checkpoint, ko Bridget Tunnicliffe tēnei.
Coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, former Christchurch City Councillor Dion Swiggs is headed to court over concerns the election result that ousted him was seriously compromised. Red zone or junk zone, what's being dumped around Christchurch? And Sir Kim Workman's iwi celebrates the Justice Campaigner's knighthood. We'd love to hear from you. Do get in touch about anything you've heard on the program today. Let us know what's on your mind. Text us 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time to get to the headlines now with Susanna.
A prominent Māori leader has told Checkpoint Oranga Tamariki should be closed down. Merepeka Raukawa-Tait, chair of the Whānau Ora Commissioning Agency, says the ministry has a toxic culture and has been taking children from families without any consideration for the intergenerational effects. Her comments follow a damning report on the attempted removal of a 6-day-old baby from his 19-year-old mother in Hawke's Bay in May. Firefighters surveyed by their union say they weren't given proper breaks and had inadequate training to cope with the Sky City Convention Centre fire in Auckland last month. Some say they were so exhausted fighting the fire that they fell asleep on high ladders. They say they also had to urinate in the street and buy their own food. Supporters of a former Christchurch councillor accused of inappropriate behaviour have this afternoon filed court proceedings, claiming the election results that ousted him were compromised. Dion Swiggs was accused of sending social media messages to people as young as 13 and insisting on hugs instead of handshakes, but an investigation into the allegations has been dropped. His supporters believe the Electoral Act was breached. An independent review of the Southern District Health Board's maternity care has found it was stymied by confusion, unclear accountability and poor planning. The report was commissioned after complaints about the board's changes to maternity care, such as introducing child and maternal hubs where babies could only be delivered in an emergency. The head of the DHB, Chris Fleming, says there was inadequate planning for changes. Fire crews will stay through the night to ensure a large bushfire is contained in Otago. The blaze covers an estimated 10 hectares of felled pine about 40 kilometres north of Dunedin. Fire and Emergencies Mo Barbara says some areas will need to be dug up to be extinguished. Those are the latest news headlines from RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen, and it's time now to get to business with Nona Peltier. Hi, Nona. So, TY Point, obviously there's a question mark over the future of the aluminium smelter. Yes. I've got weather on the brain at the moment. So, would that cause problems for the power sector meltdown?
It could potentially, but Genesis doesn't think so, and it's one of the big power generators. In case people don't know, the smelter uses up about 13% of New Zealand's total power consumption. So if it's shut down, it would be significant. But it doesn't necessarily mean that prices would plummet. And that's partly because the transmission costs between the North and South Island, you couldn't just simply divert that power to the North Island. It just wouldn't work out. So you'd need to upgrade the transmission line, about $600 million to do that. that. And so prices wouldn't necessarily plummet. They would be cheaper probably in the South Island in the short term. One thing it might do, though, is see us get rid of coal use in New Zealand sooner than later. And that could potentially change. So it's kind of a short, brief presentation. It's still up in the air. It's being reviewed whether or not the smelter closes. We'll know at the end of the first quarter of 2020, so that's about March.
Okay. So New Zealand Oil and Gas, it has, a takeover offer, but a bit of an uphill battle to get shareholders to agree to this. What's all going on behind the scenes?
There's a scheme of arrangement. So there's rules that are required for this takeover offer to go forward. And what it would require is 75%, I believe, of the minority shareholders would have to agree to sell their stake or agree to the takeover terms, because it's a scheme of arrangement, so it's a little bit different than just someone standing in the market and buying up the shares. So 75% would have to agree, and so far, with 40% of the minority share votes cast, it doesn't look like it would go ahead. So anything could change. The shareholders have, I guess, until about the 12th to post their votes. And then there's going to be a special meeting next Thursday. And then that will be decided. But for now, the share split is pretty much 48% of the votes cast so far. That's 40% are against the offer. So it might not go ahead. And certainly that was reflected in the share price today. It was down 10%. So it was at 65 cents. Now the offer was basically as much as 74 cents. So I think the market's probably thinking maybe it doesn't happen. So that's marked the share price down a little bit. Anyways, never mind. Otherwise, the market was up 0.75%. And that's on the back of some positive news out of the U.S.-China trade talks. Maybe some phased-in elimination of tariffs. Who knows? So that sounded pretty good to the market. So yeah, it rose 0.75%, up 82 points to 10,877. And the New Zealand dollar, you might wonder, is trading at 63.6 US cents, 92.5 Australian, and 49.7 British pence.
Thanks, Nona. Have a wonderful weekend. Nona Peltier there with our business news for the day. Motels are reaping record amounts for housing the homeless, tens of millions of dollars every month. The government's spend on motels has nearly tripled over the last year, with each stay costing on average 20% more than a year ago. Taxpayers have paid one Auckland motel a total of $6 million, despite the property itself being valued at less than $2 million. And with a record 14,000 people on the state housing waiting list, the government's motel bill is showing no signs of slowing down. Our reporter Nita Blake-Person and cameraman Nick Monroe visited the Otahuhu Motel, which has received more government cash than any other place in the country.
Tucked behind the Otahuhu shops, 21 Park Avenue doesn't jump out as a multi-million-dollar motel. Washing dries on balconies, kids play in the car park, and inside the communal kitchens are sparse and rooms are basic. It's been criticised for being a rat hole, but Seta, who is among the more than 900 people put up here by Work and Income over the past 3 years, says that's not the case.
This place was, safe and secure, especially us have kids. I don't see any issue while I was here. And I created this place as my own home. Everyone here in New Zealand need a place, and this is a place for them.
Housing people in motels was supposed to be a short-term solution to the ballooning waitlist for state housing, a way to stop people being forced to sleep in their cars or on the street. But they've become a lucrative windfall for moteliers. Sandeep Kaur is the manager here and says the high demand brings high price tags.
So how much was being charged here at the height?
In the minimum charge, we were charging people that I started $12.50 a week. I reduced the amount for the many clients. Those are nice and have a family, clean people. I increased the amount by myself many times. Those people are using drugs, alcohol, and don't want to leave that place because they have nowhere to go.
And there are a lot of people who have nowhere to go. Auckland Astro Residences has received the biggest government cheque for housing the homeless, receiving more than $6 million over the past 3 years. That's $1.5 million more than the second highest earning motel, and the QV valuation for this property is just $1.7 million.
Some businesses, motel owners, have taken advantage of some people's desperate situations to charge a lot of money and make a lot of money off this.
Yes, I think it's true. Because as I said to you before, high demand is expensive. They know they will pay because they don't have any option.
$1,200 a week doesn't get you much, but the basics are all here.
Since I've been staying here, I didn't see any rat or cockroach or any maggots or anything. The room was clean.
Sandeep says anyone was able to stay here, but that came with risks.
I faced many problems here when the people came here. Like I can't blame to the peoples because if they have a criminal record, because their mental situation is like that. Because if, for example, if the people doesn't have a place to go, so definitely he will do something wrong.
The Ministry for Social Development stopped using Auckland Astro residences for emergency housing in June after discovering the motel's owners had been placing clients in an illegally sublet property. The business has since sold and is now called the Pacific Motel. Neither the new nor the old owners responded to Checkpoint's request for comment, but Sandeep Kaur says they were operating as any business would.
I will not say that he took advantage because I think he had done his business. I will say like that. He have done. Everyone have like doing business to making a money. So I think government should make some cheap motels or provide them house, permanent house. Then no one will take advantage of these things.
MSD says in the June quarter it paid more than 600 motels and lodges across the country to provide emergency housing, and demand is well and truly on the rise. The latest quarterly figures show nearly 30,000 emergency housing grants were handed out, double the same time last year. That cost more than $41 million, nearly triple on the same quarter a year ago. The average value for each grant has risen from $1,100 to $1,400.
Why are we surprised? You're asking people who provide a short-term product to provide their product to government who is said we will pay for anyone who's in need. So we shouldn't be surprised by this. What I'm surprised at is that we haven't seen government make itself its own fiscal argument for why it needs to be investing in the long-term permanent supply, because that's what will truly see the numbers go down in the short-term emergency spend.
Community Housing Aotearoa Chief Executive Scott Figgenshaw says motels are a band-aid and not a genuine solution to the housing crisis.
It would actually be very inexpensive for government to make those investments in both affordable rental housing as well as additional social housing places when we look at the absolute truckload of money that they're spending on short-term motels. So we don't understand why we're not seeing more investment in both the permanent solutions if government is comfortable making these investments in the band-aid.
Scott Figgenshaw says until there is consistent investment in affordable social housing, the government's motel bill will continue to climb. The latest snapshot of the waitlist showed there were 41,000 households in the queue for state housing. Nearly 5,000 of those waiting are single parents with children. In a statement, Public Housing Minister Chris Fa'afoi says he knows motels aren't ideal, but they're better than people living in cars or in overcrowded conditions. He says the government is trying to provide more long-term sustainable housing by spending $234 million, creating 6,400 more public housing places by June 2022. Back in Otahuhu, Sandeep Kaur says the responsibility to sort out this situation lies with those in government.
Government should make a house for them, permanent house, because moving from one place to second place to third place, this is a very disturbance. This disturbs their mental situations. So I'm not blaming the people. Those create many issues here. I can understand their feelings, their mental situations, because house is the most important, and food, we can say clothes, is the most important, basic needs for the humanity. So everyone should have a house.
And that was Sandeep Kaur ending that report from Nita Blake-Person and Nick Munro. If you want to check out images from that motel, the story will be up on our website and Facebook page. Let's get now to some of your feedback, because we've got a lot of it pouring in. This is about our interview earlier with the chair of the Whānau Ora Commissioning Agency, Merepeka Raukawa-Tait, and there is a mix. Jack says, I agree with Merepeka Raukawa-Tait and would go further. It should apply to all children. They are better better in care of family and community. The state's history in childcare is bad beyond belief. We cannot let this history continue. Another short message, Merepeka for Prime Minister, that person says. On the other side of the coin, Fred's got in touch and he says, surely it is high time that Māori realised if they were to be as assiduous as regards the welfare of their offspring as they are in blaming others for having them consigned to another party's care, then much of the current angst could at least be alleviated. Someone else has got in touch to say, I am Māori, I am a whāngai child from the 1950s. I was loved and brought up in loving homes without the assistance of the state. Another person says, don't blame Oranga Tamariki only. If children weren't abused or killed, there wouldn't be an Oranga Tamariki. People need to take responsibility for their children without the state being involved. The video is one-sided on the side of the person with the baby. Thanks for all your feedback. Do keep it coming. You can text us on 2101 or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. TVs, shopping trolleys, beds, mattresses, even a gun. That's just some of the rubbish found by residents surrounding Christchurch's residential red zone. The area used to be filled with houses, but damage after the Canterbury earthquakes forced thousands of homes to be demolished. While many of the old suburban roads remain, the area now resembles a park. But it's now attracting those wanting to dump their rubbish for free. And Land Information New Zealand, which controls the land, has removed 25 tonnes of trash since January. Residents have had enough as well, with taking matters into their own hands. Our reporter Logan Church has the story.
The Christchurch residential red zone is peaceful. Ducks meandering up the stream, runners taking advantage of the empty roads. But it's what's often left at the side of these roads that's got some residents here frustrated, including David of Richmond.
Yeah, you get anything from bags of clothing or rubbish to bits and pieces that could actually be recycled or given away on the free pages or taken to the eco store. Yeah, it's just crazy the amount of stuff that could probably actually be repurposed.
David is one of many residents whose homes back onto the red zone, which is owned by Land Information New Zealand, or LINZ. And they get a front row seat of people who treat it like their personal dumping ground. Patrick Bolland is another resident who's had enough. He lives in Dallington by the Avon River.
A lot of it is actually what we call fly tipping from people who perhaps are moving out of a flat or a house and can't dump. Some of them are quite ingenious. They will actually have like a flatbed truck, and what they do is they'll have a tarpaulin and then a rope, and they'll tie it to one of the fence posts in the red zone and then just take off, which dumps the entire contents of the ute, and they can just keep driving. So it can all be done in 1 or 2 minutes.
Patrick and some other homeowners nearby have even started walking the areas at night to try and deter people from dumping stuff there.
We've got 4 or 5 people around the suburb, all who have I guess we've got a common aim, and that is the fact that we're trying to make up for the fact that we don't have all the neighbours anymore that we used to have. So we make a bit more of an effort. If we hear anything out on the road, anything that's doesn't sound, sounds out of the ordinary, that we've make an effort to grab our phones and go outside.
Avon Otakuro Network spokesperson Evan Smith says a reason why people leave rubbish here could be the cost of taking it to a tip. The minimum charge for household waste is $10, then it's almost $300 a tonne. But he says that's not an excuse for dumping it on public land.
There's all manner of things, anything that people are too lazy to take to the dump, basically household items from TVs, shopping trolleys, beds, mattresses, you name it, it's being found there. Some quite unusual objects as well. Even when we did the Motherville cleanups last year or the year before, we found a rifle and binoculars and all sorts of things tossed at the riverside.
Meanwhile, at LINZ headquarters in central Christchurch, Landed Property Manager Matt Bradley says all the rubbish found quickly adds up, but fencing installed in 2017 is helping.
This year we've got approximately 24 tonnes worth of material that were removed.
And it kind of goes up and down somewhat depending on the seasons, but yeah, that's what we've picked up so far this year. It's slightly up from last year, but what we did in 2017, we've fenced off a lot of the red zone, so it actually has reduced our dumping considerably. We were sort of paying over 200,000 a year previously, whereas we're right down to sort of 15 to 20 at the moment.
Security and maintenance contractors help keep an eye on the red zone as well as Lynn staff. But Mr Bradley says it is sometimes challenging to catch the dumpers.
Look, to be fair, it is pretty tough in terms of catching culprits, and that's sort of something that's consistent with across land and property management across New Zealand or any state really. Unless you can catch someone actually physically doing it, or if they've got their details in it, it can be very challenging to actually catch those people. So on a few occasions we've been able to identify the likely people, and they've come back and we've followed up and they've removed those items.
He says if anyone catches someone dumping rubbish, they should get in touch. In Christchurch for Checkpoint, Logan Church.
It's almost 10 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. More than 200 people gathered at a Greattown marae today as Ngāti Kahungunu ki Wairarapa celebrated the first person from their iwi to be knighted. Sir Kim Workman was knighted in the New Year's honours, and today was a chance for his community to pay tribute to the tireless justice campaigner. Te Aniwa Hurihanganui filed this report from Papawai Marae.
Sir Kim Workman has held many titles. He's been a cop, head of prisons, families commissioner and fierce campaigner for criminal justice reform. Add to that a jazz musician and a father. He's now the first person from Ngāti Kahungunu ki Wairarapa to receive a knighthood.
When I got the knighthood, I thought, I'd love to be able to have a celebration here, just to honour those people who helped to raise me when I was a boy, who sort of breathed knowledge into me and some wisdom, not all of it I don't think, but that I needed, but it was lovely.
More than 200 people gathered at Papawai Marae to celebrate the milestone. Ngāti Kahungunu leader Ngahiwi Tomoana says Sir Kim is not only a proud advocate for criminal justice reform, but also for his people.
There's acknowledgement that if you stick to the tikanga Māori and you stick to your whakapapa, you will be honoured from all sides. And that's what Kim's done. He's honoured his whakapapa from day one right to now. And now the state has recognised his contribution to the nation katoa.
When Sir Kim first entered the police force in 1958, he remembers that punishment was the focus when it came to dealing with crime.
The police had a very simplistic approach to their job, and their main thinking was that our role is to enforce the law and not to necessarily prevent offending or not to deal with issues of social harm.
It's an attitude he says has contributed to Māori being overrepresented in prison, with Māori making up more than half of those behind bars. And he says nothing will change if that mindset remains the same.
There needs to be a significant fundamental cultural change, and that's going to be really difficult to achieve. I think essentially it means we have to redefine the relationship between the Crown and Māori, and we have to give Māori much more authority over their own lives.
Justice reform advocate Laura O'Connell-Rapira says thanks to Sir Kim, she can see a justice system in the near future that is fair for everyone.
The world needs more Kim Workmans, and I and many of the other Just Speak whānau aspire to continue the legacy of the work that he and others like Annette Sykes and Moana Jackson and Tracy McIntosh, they've sort of paved the way for us to build the more beautiful, more just, more equitable future that our heart and people like him and their legacy shows us is possible.
Sir Kim's official investiture didn't happen at Papawai Marae.
I was advised that investitures were only rarely held at Marae, most commonly when the recipient is physically incapable of travelling or does not have long to live. Thankfully, I didn't qualify.
But he's thankful to be recognised there on the same day as it happens when Papawai Marae received Wāhi Tupuna classification on the New Zealand Heritage List. He says it's the centre of the universe, his tūranga waiwai, and celebrating his knighthood where he is from is something he won't forget. In Greytown for Checkpoint, I'm Tianiwa Hurihanganui.
Have you ever felt hungry but you just couldn't bring yourself to get off the couch and walk to the fridge? No, not a problem I face frequently. Turns out it's not just humans that have varying levels of motivation when it comes to sourcing food, but cattle do too. And this is important because high country farmers want cows who aren't afraid to tackle steep terrain to make sure more of the land is grazed. Our visual journalist Simon Rogers and rural reporter Maya Burry have the story.
While these are not domesticated animals, over the winter this herd of Hereford cows has been sporting bright red GPS tracking collars, which have been recording their movements around the Canterbury High Country. It's all part of the research being done by Lincoln University PhD candidate Christian Moreno, who is identifying the different grazing personalities of the cows.
I'm monitoring, getting about 500 GPS data points a day for each cow, and really looking in detail on identifying which places each cow prefer to graze.
Christian Moreno says while he has more than 5 million GPS data points to work his way through, he's already found some significant differences in how some cows in the same mob spend their time. He says some animals will walk about 2 kilometres a day, while others will more than double that.
Some animals, they naturally prefer to stay in flat and gentle slope places, and others, they choose to go somewhere up in the hill, and they might graze more isolated or just prefer going to other places, and that way we can use the whole landscape.
The study is being done on 4 different Canterbury farms, including Lees Valley Station in North Canterbury. Farm manager Brandon Dalton says long-term the research could be a game changer, as having stock that like to explore means more feed can be utilised and the cows are eating a more varied diet.
There's so many steep hills, steep brushy country, and we've had issues in the past with stock hanging at the bottom and you have to push them up every day. Or if they're not doing well, you just have to bring them down. And there's only so much room on the flats, and we have that allocated to other stock and so forth. So finding the right animals that can actually utilize that country.
Christian's work is part of a wider project involving 7 PhD researchers at Lincoln University who are looking at how to vary diets and grazing environments for sheep, cattle and deer. Professor Pablo Gregorini says this will improve the well-being of the animals while also having a positive impact on human health and the environment.
So who would like to eat an animal that has been in a boring diet for a long time, right? We have our results already that shows that those animals are unhealthy, that those animals are stressed. Pretty much eating those animals that have a healthier life, that live on a really rich environment, we are going to create health for ourselves.
Christian Moreno says he still has a way to go in determining what genetic and what environmental factors influence the Hereford cows' different grazing personalities. But he says the cows seem happy enough to wear their red collars for the sake of science. For Checkpoint, ko Maya Burry tēnei.
And Maya's piece will go up on our webpage and our Facebook page if you want to check out exactly what's going on with those cows. It's like giant Fitbits that they're wearing. And a lot of feedback still coming in on our interview with Merepeka Raukawa-Tait and her calls for Oranga Tamariki to be shut down. Bill says, my question is, where were the whānau when these troubled Māori parents needed help to address problems with violence, drugs, stable and loving family life? Whānau need to show they can be trusted to look after their own children before those children can be safely passed into their hands. I say prove you will look after these children, as only then can we consider passing them into your care. We have had this from Kath, who says, I agree with all Merepeka is saying. Such passion and knowledge, lots of scary questions about our racist society. It is time for Māori to be fully supported and respected of their own systems. Nothing is perfect, but it is time that intergenerational trauma is stopped. Healing must start. This one from a person who describes himself as mid-aged Pākehā male here. And this person says, Merepeka couldn't be more right. Another one says, Merepeka's rant was sad to listen to. She is denying reality. When Oranga Tamariki rescue at-risk children, they are putting the child first in often difficult circumstances. Instead of blaming everybody, taking responsibility. Oranga Tamariki should be further funded, credentialed and supported. That's from Mike. Thanks for getting in touch, Mike. This one says, no one's speaking out about how shameful the behaviour of Oranga Tamariki staff is. Seems to be mentioning the babies in the middle of this. Who will protect them when families go wrong? And this one who says, as a Pākehā single mum, I totally support everything Merepeka Raukawa-Tait said. I am angry too. Stealing babies for what? Pākehā adoption? It is never okay. We are not all fitting into corporate models of neoliberal behaviour, and those kids need their mums, and mums need their kids. Nothing could be more valuable or transformational. It is disgusting to steal babies off their mothers. I can find no justification for it at all. We all love our children. If mums have addictions and other issues, as do many Pākehā, they just need health support. I agree, it, meaning Oranga Tamariki, should be closed down. And Mike has got in contact to say, I hear so much said about grievous injustices that do not fit with kaupapa Māori. That's not the point, he says.
RNZ News at 6, ngā mihi nui, ko Susana Leata with DNA. The head of the Māori-led inquiry into Oranga Tamariki wants the whole ministry shut down. Oranga Tamariki has apologised to a Hawke's Bay family following a damning internal review of the attempted removal of a newborn child earlier this year. The family is now considering launching a legal case to stop the state removing Māori children from their whānau. Merepeka Raukawa-Tait says there's been a total disregard for the fact that Māori can look after themselves if they're given support. She told Checkpoint Oranga Tamariki can't continue.
Shut it down, get rid of it, have a core policy advisory ministry advising the minister, but everything else, the delivery of the services, the supporting of the families, the supporting of the mothers, all the supports that need to get in, they should not be delivered by a government agency. No way.
Merepeka Raukawa-Tait says a few more reports into Oranga Tamariki are due to be released, and she believes they will all be damning. The MP for Clutha Southland, National Hamish Walker, says the Southern District Health Board has completely botched its new maternity care model. Earlier this year, the DHB replaced the Lumsden Maternity Centre with a hub where babies are only delivered in emergencies. An independent review has now found the distance some women need to travel to give birth is not insignificant, and midwives need formal backup. Mr Walker says the DHB has left the northern Southland community high and dry without a birthing centre.
The DHB need to just admit they stuffed this up all along, reinstate services at Lumsden, or at the very least have an independent review into how this decision was made, because the wrong one was made all along. They used incorrect data. The communities warned them time and time again roadside births would occur, and they had 4 within the first month.
The Clutha Southland MP, Hamish Walker. Firefighters surveyed by their union say they weren't given proper breaks and had inadequate training to cope with the Sky City Convention Centre fire in Auckland last month. Some say they were so exhausted fighting the fire that they fell asleep on high ladders. They say they also had to urinate in the street and buy their own food. Ron Devlin, Auckland Regional Manager for Fire and Emergency, says the feedback is a chance for the organisation to learn and improve. He says safety is paramount and they'll talk to individuals to find out more. Ribbons were tied to the fence of the Catholic Cathedral in central Auckland this afternoon to honour victims of sexual abuse by clergymen. A man abused as a child by a predatory priest had earlier given evidence to the Royal Commission into Abuse in State and Faith-Based Care. Mike Ledingham hongied with Father Peter Deepene outside the cathedral, but stressed he was greeting him as tangata whenua and not as a member of the priesthood.
After 60 years, I've come to take grips with living with the memory, and it's not a nice memory. And as long as there's victims alive, this church is responsible, and I think they need to wake up, become honest, and start dealing with it appropriately, you know.
Mike Ledingham, Father Deepene, who also tied a ribbon to the fence, says he did it in acknowledgement of the wrong done by the church. Supporters of a former Christchurch councillor have filed court proceedings claiming the election result that ousted him was compromised. Dion Swiggs was accused of sending inappropriate social media messages to people as young as 13 and insisting on giving them hugs instead of handshakes. Under investigation by the council, he subsequently lost his seat in last month's local body elections. The supporters believe the Electoral Act was breached and they're asking for an inquiry into the process the council took and the campaign of Jake McClellan, who won Mr Swiggs' seat. Spokesperson Hayley Gulietta says there's a lot of support for the court action.
We were able to get 10 people, quite a diverse range of people from our community and our business sector to support this, and then we've got many more people supporting it on the outside as well. People just want to see some democracy happen.
Hayley Gulietta says the group is motivated to uphold the principles of democracy. Self-exiled members of the Cambodian opposition who planned to return to the country this weekend have been blocked by the Thai and Malaysian governments. The opposition leader, Sam Rainsy, was prevented from boarding a flight in Paris, and a senior party member was detained by immigration officials at Kuala Lumpur airport. The ABC's Eliza Borrello reports.
Sam Rainsy has been living in exile in France for 4 years but plans to return to Cambodia this weekend. He says he must return to restore democracy to the country, which has been ruled by former Khmer Rouge soldier Hun Sen since 1985. He had planned to fly from Paris to Bangkok before crossing the Thai-Cambodian border, but late yesterday was stopped from boarding his flight out of France. Mr Rainsy says the airline staff told him the instruction came from very high up. Thailand's Prime Minister has warned he can't allow interference into a fellow ASEAN nation's affairs.
We apologise for that glitch. That was Eliza Borrello reporting from the ABC. Fire crews will need to start digging up a fire that's moved underground in Otago in order to extinguish it. The fire at Buckland's Crossing, which is 40 kilometres north of Dunedin, has covered an estimated 10 hectares of felled pines. Fire and Emergencies Mo Barbara says a night crew will be posted at the scene of the fire overnight.
Crews will be organised in the morning to continue tomorrow. Fire is deep-seated into the ground and having to be dug up to extinguish. They'll be using hand tools to physically dig the fire up and then extinguish it with water or dirt.
Mo Barbara. The Dunedin City Council has asked residents of Waikoaiti and Karitane to avoid using garden hoses and sprinklers over the next few days because of the fire. It's coming up to 6:30. New Zealand have won the toss and will bowl first against England in the fourth T20 international that has just got underway at McLean Park in Napier. The Black Caps have a 2-1 lead in the 5-match series. In domestic cricket, Wellington were all out for 91 in their first innings against Auckland on the first day of their Plunket Shield match at the Basin Reserve. Black cap Lockie Ferguson led the attack, taking 4 for 23. In Dunedin, Northern District's opening batsman Henry Cooper scored a century, posting 149 against Otago. Supercars Championship leader Scott McLaughlin has clocked the third fastest time in today's practice session at the Sandown 500 in Melbourne. The New Zealand driver could wrap up back-to-back championships this weekend if results go his way. Interest in former All Black Sonny Bill Williams signing with the Toronto Wolfpack has been so great it crashed the club's website. The signing is the biggest in English Super League history, and 70,000 people tried to access the Canadian club's site once the announcement was made. Meanwhile, Kiwis captain Benji Marshall has fond memories of playing with Williams.
I just used to like his shoulder charges, even though you can't do that anymore. But yeah, I think it's great for the sport. Obviously, Sonny Bill's a great athlete, so come back to rugby league's a coup for the game, I think.
Kiwis captain Benji Marshall. That's the news.
Tomorrow morning, a spot of rock and roll. I'll talk to Flea, the busy bassist of the Red Hot Chili Peppers, as well as Alice Cooper, the benefits of bamboo, astrotourism in New Zealand, and why a specialist in endocrine disruption no longer sups on his favourite soup. Join me, Kim Hill, tomorrow morning from 8 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Waitomo, also Coromandel, Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Taumaranui. Cloudy periods and isolated showers. Patchy drizzle morning and night. Showers more widespread about Northland, Bay of Plenty and Taupo tomorrow evening. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, fine weather. Whanganui, Manawatu and Wairarapa, cloudy periods and isolated showers. Taranaki, Horowhenua, Kapiti Coast and Wellington, mostly cloudy. Scattered showers becoming isolated later tomorrow. For Marlborough, cloudy periods and a few showers, but the Kaikoura coast remains dry. Nelson, Buller and Westland, occasional rain, heavier tomorrow. Isolated thunderstorms for Buller and Westland. Fiordland, expect rain with heavy falls and isolated thunderstorms easing tomorrow evening. Canterbury and Otago, cloudy periods, scattered showers and norwesterly gales for the high country. Southland, cloudy periods and occasional rain. Chatham Islands, cloudy periods tomorrow. RNZ National, it's 6:09.
Thanks, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Members of the public have again tied coloured ribbons to the fence around Auckland's Catholic Cathedral to honour victims of sexual abuse. Today, a survivor of abuse at the hands of a predatory priest gave his evidence to the Royal Commission at the end of its second week. Mike Leddington described the horror of the ordeal he and his two younger brothers went through. Our reporter Andrew McRae has been at the hearing and filed this report.
On behalf of the bishops and the congregational leaders, I wanted to acknowledge what you've said today and your hurt and your anger about what happened to you when you were in care.
I don't think you have the capacity to deal with it. I'm saying it needs to be done by non-aligned. I don't think you'll ever have the capacity. You're a dinosaur. You're a thing of the past. I think you have to admit that you can't handle it.
Apology not accepted. That's Mike Leddingham responding to the Catholic Church's lawyer Sally McKechnie. His abuser was Father Francis Green, parish priest in Onehunga in the 1950s. The abuse started in 1958 when Mr Leddingham was 8 years old.
The horrific abuse that happened can't be told and understood using polite words or watered down rhetoric.
He says it changed his life forever.
I was screwed up mentally for quite a few years and didn't always do the right things. But by the same token, I don't preach or tell people to follow me like churches do. I'm more like, don't follow me, I'm lost.
He then quoted his sister, who described the impact of the abuse on the whole family.
With the abuse came our journey from a happy family with the usual happy feisty kids to one of 3 troubled teenagers who became angry, abusing and self-abusing men with consequences for themselves and traumatic results for our family.
After leaving school, Mr Leddingham joined the army and eventually became an SAS soldier.
Nothing the SAS threw at me, physically or mentally, fazed me as much as the sexual and mental abuse I suffered as a child at that convent.
Mr Leddingham says the church can't be trusted and must be held accountable. He agreed to talk to the Royal Commission, not just to air his story, but to give a voice to his brothers and many other children abused in church institutions. Outside the Cathedral of St Patrick and St Joseph on Wyndham Street, Mike Leddingham hogging the Dean of the Cathedral, Father Peter Tipene, as people tied ribbons of remembrance to the fence railings. Mr Leddingham stressed he was greeting Father Tipene as tangata whenua, not as a priest.
After 60 years, I've come to take grips with living with the memory, and it's not a nice memory, and as long as there's victims alive, this church is responsible, and I think they need to wake up, become honest, and start dealing with it appropriately, you know.
Father Tipene also tied a ribbon to the fence in support of the victims of sexual abuse.
We have to acknowledge the wrong that we've done, but we hope for healing and we hope for grace and peace for all the victims. And we continue to pray for the perpetrators too, but again, you know, there's a lot of hurting and a lot of healing to take place, so we pray for Horongo, for the healing that is required, the reconciliation.
At the end of his testimony, Mike Leddingham had a message for abusers and enablers.
I think that you'll find when your death takes its toll, all your money, power and confession could never buy back your soul. And I'll tell you further, for I know that it's true. Even Jesus would never forgive what you do.
The Commission has ended its first 2 weeks of public hearings, with more scheduled in March next year. For Checkpoint in Auckland, ko Andrew McRae-Tene.
Supporters of former Christchurch City Councillor Dion Swiggs have this afternoon filed court proceedings claiming the election result that ousted him was seriously compromised. Mr Swiggs was accused of inappropriate social media messages to people as young as 13 and insisting on hugs instead of handshakes. He denied the allegations but was subsequently voted out. The court action follows the council's decision to drop its investigation into the allegations. Conan Young reports.
Dion Swiggs' supporters say the way the complaint against him was handled represents a breach of the Electoral Act. They were not available to be interviewed or to explain exactly how the Act had been breached, but said his campaign had been sabotaged. They said the result of the election was therefore seriously compromised. This at the same time as the council's decision to drop the investigation into Mr Swiggs. The council's chief executive, Dawn Baxendale, also wouldn't be interviewed, but sent a statement saying the code of conduct can only be enforced against sitting councillors, not those who have left office. Labour's Christchurch Central MP, Duncan Webb, says it feels like the investigation has been half-baked.
Yeah, look, I feel for Dion in this situation because he has been, tried in the court of public opinion and through the media, and we know that's not the best way to go. We know it's not the most accurate. He thought that there was a process in place through which he could have his say and, if appropriate, be vindicated. It's now been taken away.
Community activist Wayne Hawker has already laid his own code of conduct complaint against the Mayor for her handling of the matter. He says Leanne Dalzell should have initiated an investigation in May when she first heard of the complaints. He says the council's move to drop the investigation is gutless.
A man's livelihood has been, and his good name has been tarnished. He should be given a chance to clear his name, and they've taken that away from him.
Dion Swiggs has declined all interview requests since RNZ reported details of the complaints against him back in September. To date, he has told his side of the story through a series of statements and press conferences where questions were not allowed. Most recently, he posted a 4-minute video message on Facebook.
The investigator, Judge Matthews, found that 2 complaints had materiality and required further investigation. He then put the investigation on hold till after the council election, despite me and my senior legal counsel asking that the full hearing be held pre-election so that I was able to clear my name. The whole process has been flawed from the start.
In the video, Mr Swiggs says he's considering lodging a judicial review of the council's process. Law Professor Bill Hodge says he could have a good case, and there's a chance the council may be forced to continue with its investigation.
It wouldn't result in a substantive outcome on the merits on one side or the other. It would just say you should continue because you've exposed the complainants and, more importantly, one of your former councillors to the implications and the innuendo of having committed serious misconduct. And that's an improper place to leave him hanging.
The anonymous complainants have declined to be interviewed, but did say they were also disappointed the investigation had been dropped. RNZ contacted all 16 city councillors and the Mayor to ask if they thought natural justice had been followed in the council's handling of this matter. All either refused to comment or did not return calls. One councillor, Aaron Kewen, says there's been no natural justice. Kei Ototahi Aho, mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko Conan Young tēnei.
It's almost 17 minutes after 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. The first funerals will be held today for the 9 women and children from a Mormon community in Mexico who were killed by gunmen earlier this week. They were attacked while travelling in a 3-car caravan south of the US-Mexico border. All that was left for family members to sift through when they arrived at the scene were ash, bones and a car ablaze and riddled with bullet holes. CNN's Matt Rivers travelled to the remote ambush sites.
At the checkpoints, soldiers covered their faces. Guns and armor aside, better to stay anonymous in such a violent place. Bienvenidos a Bavispe, the town closest to where 9 Americans were slaughtered on Monday. So this place is so locked down right now that we're being given a military escort to the area where at least one of the shootings happened. The massacre started here. This is the exact spot where Renita Miller and 4 of her kids, ages 12, 10, and 2 8-month-old twins, were killed. They were ambushed by armed gunmen, shot, and their vehicle lit on fire. Up the road a few minutes later, 2 more cars were ambushed. 2 mothers and 2 children also killed by gunfire. Another 7 kids escaped. They'd all left just minutes before from Renita's home, just a few blocks away. They were part of a community of hundreds of Americans, largely Mormon, who have lived here for a long time. Julian LeBaron found one of the bodies.
And then she was just laying on the ground when we came on her, and I could tell that, I could tell from the bloodstains that they aimed for her heart.
The family wants to know who would shoot and kill women and children and then light their bodies on fire. We saw Mexican investigators at the scene on Wednesday. This area can be one of the most dangerous drug trafficking routes in the entire world. And drug cartels have been fighting over this land for a long time. The government says that could be the reason why the people on this road were killed. They say that maybe one cartel mistook that caravan for another. But increasingly so, the family of the victims isn't buying it. They think the families were specifically targeted by drug cartels, though they don't know why. This community has had run-ins with gangs before, but say this came out of nowhere.
We haven't been threatened, at least not in any way to suppose that women and children would be murdered.
Mexican President López Obrador campaigned on the need to reduce crime in this country, though Mexico's murder rate now stands roughly 6 times higher than that of the United States. The president insists his strategy of poverty reduction will eventually ease drug violence, but some are losing patience. And while authorities aren't yet saying who is responsible for this shooting, they are saying that the shooters used American-made firearms, firing some 200 rounds at 3 women and 14 children.
Matt Rivers reporting from northern Mexico. A tenant moving into a brand new Auckland social housing complex says it's a dream come true to have a place of her own after being homeless. The Salvation Army officially opened its $28 million housing block, Te Hononga Tangata, also known as the Royal Oak Housing Community, on Mount Albert Road today. Our reporter Jessie Chang was there.
Clean, spacious and a place to call home. For many of the 59 people moving into the housing block, this is the only home they will be able to rent in Auckland. Ray Ray Connor was homeless 2 years ago and is currently living in emergency housing. She can't wait to move in.
I'm way excited, I can't even believe it's true. I feel really lucky.
Ray Ray Connor found it extremely hard to find places to rent.
It was really disheartening because it just seemed impossible, especially with the amount of money we get and stuff like that, and the prices up here in Auckland are really high, so this is way more affordable.
The Salvation Army housing complex called Te Hononga Tangata is a 52-unit apartment block in the Auckland suburb of Royal Oak. It includes a mix of 1- and 2-bedroom apartments, green spaces and a community garden. There will also be a chaplain and a range of services for tenants. The government is putting $10 million into the development. $4 million of that has gone towards construction, with the rest going to operational costs. The Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, who was at the official opening, stressed the importance of joint partnerships with agencies to solve housing problems in the country.
We should be working together because the wraparound support you can provide here will go above and beyond what we can provide often through Housing New Zealand and other support networks and services. And that wraparound service is what turns a unit into a home and a place of recovery and a place of respite as well.
There were more than 700 referrals to the Salvation Army for a place at Te Hononga Tangata. Its Senior Tenancy Manager for Social Housing, Jasmine Hedewini, says that doesn't come as a surprise when she looks at the growing social housing register.
I remember in 2014 it was sitting at about 5,000-6,000. In 2019 we're sitting at just over 12,000. So it is quite poti, quite sad that a lot of our whānau are seeing no other alternative but to look for social housing because they just can't access anything else.
Jasmine Hedewini says for one of the tenants moving in, a kaumātua, he has been waiting for social housing for 5 years.
He moved to Kaitaia. He just had absolutely nowhere down here in Auckland. Was homeless. He suffered a stroke, so he doesn't have much use of his left-hand side. Living up in Kaitaia, couch surfing. So he's the longest that that I know of.
And for the Salvation Army, the job isn't done yet. They're looking to open another 22-unit social housing complex in Westgate next year, and then a 46-unit housing block in Flatbush. For tenants moving into Te Hononga Tangata though, they're looking forward to starting a new chapter of their lives. I tamaki makodo mō te hōtaka o te ahi nei ko Jesse Chang tēnei.
10 months of excavation has unearthed at least 14 mammoth skeletons in Mexico. But what's more remarkable is where they were found, in traps built by humans about 15,000 years ago. The BBC's Riley Carlson reports.
It's the largest discovery ever of mammoth remains. 800 bones found in Tultepec, north of Mexico City. But more remarkable is the skeletons were uncovered in massive pits, some 25 meters wide and nearly 2 meters deep. Researchers believe these are the first mammoth traps to ever be uncovered. Professor Sylvia Gonzalez is a geoarchaeologist from Liverpool John Moores University. She says the findings are significant.
You know, we always have this mental image of the sort of lonely hunter killing the mammoth with a spear thrower. It's telling us that they were organized, that they were thinking ahead, that they were probably herding the animals to fall into these traps. Apart from the mammoths, there is evidence of one horse and one camel. And it's just the level of sophistication that they needed to have to organize all of these strategies for hunting.
Professor Gonzalez says it's a watershed moment for the study of these animals and the people who interacted with them across the entire American continent.
And that was Riley Carlson reporting. Sonny Bill Williams moved to Toronto was 2 years in the making. The 34-year-old two-time Rugby World Cup champion, serial code switcher and sometimes boxer has confirmed he's signed with the Toronto Wolfpack Super League side, which play in the English Super League competition. The club's director of football, Brian Noble, told sports editor Stephen Hewson SBW was a target for them from the outset.
You contact who you think is going to have some profile in North America. You know, he wasn't the only man on the list, but I have to say he was the number one preference from day one a couple of years ago when we were speaking to the ownership group. Should we reach the hallowed turf of Super League, which we did last year, it was important that we, for our fans in Toronto and North America, that we brought what we perceive to be the best known rugby player on the planet. I think we've done that. I think it's an unbelievable coup.
At 34, though, he's knocking on in terms of years when it comes to a player at that level.
No.
And he's had a few injuries the last couple of years. Are you concerned?
Yeah. I'm no more concerned than you are with any. When you look at the game of rugby worldwide, and particularly league, it's a high, fast, highly skilled, high collision sport. And anybody can get injured out there. But at some stage, you have to balance that out with who would make the biggest impact in relation to our newness, if you like, in the Super League, and what name would. Clearly he's there for his playing purposes. Clearly he wants that to be his major contribution, as we do. But then you run that risk with any player. You could stick a 19-year-old in there and he's likely to get injured the way that the game's manufactured now. You can't make decisions on the back of thinking that somebody might get injured. You make decisions on the back of his great profile. He's a great fella. The humility he has with different people and what he brings off the field as well as on the field is clearly a criteria we've looked at.
Where do you see him playing? In the centres or back in the forwards as he has done in the NRL?
Yeah, I personally would think he'd be on an edge somewhere, whether that be in the centres or in the back row. I think, and one of the great questions he's been asking as well is, I need to slightly change the way I approach my fitness. So he's clearly on top of his game in relation to where he thinks he wants to play, and his deliberations with the coach in Japan clearly leads me to believe that he understands and the coach understands the role he can play. So, yeah, it's a long answer to your short question, Steve, but probably back row with the ability to play in the centre.
And does he get to continue boxing?
Well, I'm not going to fight him. He can fight whoever he wants, but I haven't spoken to him about boxing, but I certainly won't be on his fight list.
But you would be comfortable if he kept or had the occasional bout?
It has to be in the parameters of what we've invested heavily in what he does and what he doesn't do for us. But I'm not seeing any distractions as to why he couldn't. But clearly, it's not one of the in-depth conversations we've had.
$10 million is a lot of money for 2 years. Is that what it's worth?
That's what they're saying. That's what they're saying, Steve. So it's certainly a great deal, and it's probably the biggest deal that the Super League in the Northern Hemisphere has offered anybody. We think we'll get value for money.
You've talked about, obviously, the profile, and I mean, similarities have been made to David Beckham going to the LA Galaxy. But does Sonny Bill Williams have that cachet? I mean, how well known is he in Canada? I would have thought not.
There is a lot of rugby in Canada, league and union, and a lot of money's been spent over the years trying to get the game going over there. The fact that we have 13,000 fans already in year 3 of our existence, they like our form of the game, league. It's easy to understand, if you like. I think they consider it a cross between MMA and NFL, and so they get the rules, they get the 5 drives, and they get the handover principle, so they see the ball a lot. I think they love the excitement, they love the fact that it's in play all of the time. Does he have the profile? Well, from our reaction from prior to this interview, I was doing a long interview with TV crews and news corps in Canada, so they certainly embrace it in Toronto. It's the 4th biggest city in North America, and it's funny that you mentioned David Beckham and LA Galaxy. The MLS, the football concepts over there in North America, are the 2 biggest decisions to promote their game, and the success that they've had. I think it's up to $300 million now. You could pay for a franchise over there. It's the signing of David Beckham and, interestingly, allowing Toronto into the MLS. Were the 2 biggest decisions that their chief executive said that they've made. So I'm confident that he has that kind of impact in North America, and I'm confident that it's going to be. It's already been worldwide news, as you're quite aware, and he's already rocking it.
Toronto Wolfpack's Director of Football, Brian Noble, talking to sports editor Stephen Hewson. And that's all we've got time for this evening. Don't forget, you can check out our visual stories online.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The head of the Māori-led inquiry into Oranga Tamariki, Merepeka Raukawa-Tait, wants the whole ministry shut down. The MP for Clutha Southland, National's Hamish Walker, says the Southern District Health Board has completely botched its new community maternity care model. Firefighters surveyed by their union say they weren't given proper breaks and did not have adequate training to cope with the convention centre fire in Auckland last month. And supporters of a former Christchurch councillor accused of inappropriate behaviour have this afternoon filed court proceedings, claiming the election result that ousted him was compromised. Those are the headlines. Our next news will be at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
We know that about 10% of children in care are being abused. That's what they report.
Lately with me, Karen Hayes, your late night eye on the latest headlines and the people who are making them.
Child rearing in this country doesn't rely just on parents.
Live with local national